will just pop up on your screen confirming that we are
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, good. So before we move on, does anyone have any questions on that? Is everyone happy where we're going? Lots of nods. The difficulty I have is I can't see everyone on one screen. That's the problem I have. So if someone is being missed off, can they just shout or something, and then their view will come into my vision. You know, their vision will come into my single screen view at the moment. Okay, so Marie, item 2 on the agenda. Apologies for absence. Any to note, please?
Yes, Chair. There are apologies from 2 Cabinet members, Councillors Richard Samuel and Councillor Joanna Wright. Councillor Dave Wood may have to leave early. And also apologies from Lottie Smith-Collins, Clerk to Saltford Parish Council, Jean Foster-Chaco, Clerk to Shoscombe Parish Council, Alan Butcher, Clerk to Chelwood Parish Council, and Trudy Gilbank, Clerk to Farnborough Parish Council.
Thank you for that, Marie. So, as we hear that Councillor Dave Wood has to leave a bit early, so if anyone's got any questions for him directly as we go through the session, please make sure we get them in earlier rather than later because he might disappear. And then Dave, when you get to that moment, you have to disappear. If you just type in that you're leaving, then we know you've left the meeting. That would be probably the easiest way to manage it. Item 3 on the agenda, any urgent business agreed by me. There's been no urgent business come my way, so there's none there to be noted. Minutes of previous meeting. Now, somebody will have to move and second this because I was not at the last meeting. So do I have any takers for that, please? I can't hear anyone.
Rob just indicated he would second that.
Second that, and who moved it, sorry?
I'll do either.
I'm quite happy to, Andy. I did put an MIS in.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yes, you have. Yeah, sorry. Yes, Sally, thank you. Just seen that. Thank you very much. Yeah, okay. So we're happy to move on. Item 5, terms of reference. Now, I'm informed that at the last Avon meeting, the ALCA AGM in June, it was recommended that an additional point to be added to the terms of reference under clause 5.3, the clause stating items that are not relevant for parish liaison will be those, 1, that relate to a single or small number of parishes, 2, for which other effective channels of communication exist, 3, that are day-to-day operational issues, and 4, that need to be addressed immediately. And it goes on to say the parish liaison is asked to agree to add a new sentence at the end of clause 5.3 that states, other than important items raised by a single parish or a small number of parishes that are agreed by the parish liaison agenda setting group will be included on the agenda. So did anyone want to make any comment on that, please?
Councillor Dawn Drury, who's the chair of Baines ALCA. When we discussed this, we appreciated that in the past some meetings were dominated by individual issues from singular parish councils and small clusters. But we all agreed that the amendment was required because we felt that it was unfair and restrictive to the smaller groups of parishes, because at some point the agenda item may be very important and it should be included. So we just liked a little amendment to add that last bit to that particular point, 5.3.
Okay, so Dawn, are you moving? Do we have to move that, or how do we do this, or just agree it?
Agree, don't we?
Does anyone have any objection to it? I suppose that's the way to put it, isn't it? No objection. Okay, I'm just pausing because it takes a while sometimes for either people to type or to go off mute. That's why I'm just pausing. Okay, so Marie, I think that's no objection to that going forward. So that the the groups agreed that.
Thank you. We're grateful for that. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Councillor Romero and Will Godfrey next as an update from the council. So I know you've got a 20-minute slot, but I'll try to ask for you to be as succinct as possible, please. Thank you. Councillor Romero.
Thank you very much, Chair. You'll all be pleased to know that I've no intention of speaking for 20 minutes. What I wanted to do really was to just cast our minds back, I guess, to when the pandemic started for us, when this crisis started, and it feels like such a long time ago. But in March, the government announced that we were going into lockdown, and all of a sudden, all the things that we had in train at that moment were, I wouldn't say thrown up out of the window, but they were certainly thrown up in the air. And so we've been madly paddling to make sure that we can keep abreast of the situation, make sure we've got everything in place that supports our most vulnerable communities, that we can offer that support and help as and when it's needed, whether that's to individuals, to organisations, to businesses, etc. And at the same time, making sure that issues, when they come up, if they are significant, are shared or at least brought to the attention of the relevant ministers in government, so that we can make sure that we can get these invariably problems addressed. So a particular one of those examples would obviously be the financial straits that we found ourselves in, and so we raised this issue with the relevant ministers early on. We received 2 tranches of support funding that came to around about £10 million, and as you will recall, in the last couple of weeks we've also there's been a new announcement of a share of a fund of £500 million, plus also 75% of the lost revenues that we predict for this year. That's excluding money that would be coming in from commercial rents or from that's associated with our leisure providers. But during this period of time, we've not just been focusing on money, we've also been having a look at how the crisis is impacting on everybody, all the different communities. And so we've been hosting a variety of webinars to try and remain engaged with our various different parts of Bath and North East Somerset and different groups as well. So we've had quite a number of those. We had one which was on the financial recovery, one on slavery, one with young people, another on climate emergency, and I'm sure there's many others that I have missed out at this moment. I think there was one which we took part in as well, which was on reopening the high street. And following on from that, we have another on Monday, which is targeting the hospitality sector. So if you know of anybody who would be interested in taking part in that, or at the very least watching that on YouTube, then please let us know, and we can make sure that they get the right sort of information so they can either take part or watch. I'm going to now hand over to Will so he can fill in all the missing gaps, and then I will perhaps there'll be an opportunity to sort of summarise, or at least we can answer any questions that people have. Oh, sorry, there is one more thing I do want to add before I let Will speak, which is I just want to make a special say a special thank you actually to everybody who within their various communities has created quite localised support for those in their community. And also I'd like to extend that thank you as well to everybody that's been working in our Compassionate Community Hub as well, because I think without your work in doing what you've been doing, we would be in a far worse situation, and many of our more vulnerable people across the area would be suffering. So thank you. And now I'll hand over to Will.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Romero. I haven't really got much to add, really. I mean, I think it might be better to take questions. I think the only thing I want to say is that, you know, as an organisation, we've been through sort of a 3-4 month period that, you know, has really sort of tested us. But I'm enormously proud and grateful for the work our staff have done. I think they've really stepped up to some quite unprecedented circumstances. And equally, you know, again, as Dina said, just pass on thanks to you and everybody else for, you know, for all the work that you've done as well to help our communities through that. I actually think, generally speaking, you know, we've dealt pretty well with a very challenging set of circumstances. We certainly learned lots of skills that we probably didn't necessarily think we had, or we would have to use back in March, which seems a long time ago now. You know, and I think we're really focused on trying to make sure that we continue doing the best that we can, and make sure that we're as prepared as possible for what might happen through the winter months. So I think that's probably all I'd like to add, and obviously, if there are any questions, very happy to try to take them.
Thank you very much, Will, and Dina. Yes, so anyone got any questions? I think there was one question that's been raised by somebody asking about taking part in the hospitality meeting. Mark Hayward has put out on the chat function a link for the webinar that you have to register. So that should answer that question from anyone. Any questions, please? It's all very quiet. Is that? I'm not lost you all, I think.
No, I think Doug is trying to unmute himself. I think that's the most challenging part of these Zoom meetings, isn't it?
Yes, there he is. Okay.
As someone of advanced years, opening up the high street for me also involves access to toilets. So could I ask what the plan is to open some of your public toilets?
Well, I don't know quite where you are coming from, but certainly all the council ones which were run through Healthmatic, they weren't shut at all during the pandemic. So if there's a specific ones that have remained shut, it would probably be useful for you just to let me know where they are, and we can have a look and see what the situation is with those particular ones.
Well, the two near Waitrose are shut.
Okay, actually, I am aware
that
that's Waitrose in Bath, isn't it?
Oh yes, Waitrose in Bath. Yes.
Let me have a look into those ones for you, Doug. Okay.
The council offices are not accessible anymore.
If I could, Dina, I actually had some information on that a couple of days ago when I was answering a similar question.
In that case, then I'll hand straight over to my cabinet member for adult health and social care, which is Councillor Rob Appleyard.
Yeah. Hi everybody. Good evening to you. Yes, we've obviously had questions around public toilets, and as Dina's mentioned, Hauser hadn't closed. There is a particular scenario around the one at Waitrose. That's actually, if you like, a private toilet, and part of the planning obligation is that they have to have that open, and the council's planning department are talking to the landlord to ensure that they comply with opening those toilets as soon as possible. So it's sat with a process at the moment, but it is very much recognised that it needs to open.
Yep. Thank you for that, Rob. Yes, there was an email that you put out a few days ago, as you say, that talking about toilets. I've got another. Sorry, Doug. Did that answer your question?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much. If you've got any specific points, you can always email Rob, and I'm sure he'll keep you informed of the progress on those. Yeah, as he is with the rest of us.
Oh, thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, I'm good like that. I've got Councillor Karen Warrington next on the list. Karen?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wondered if the council have any plans to assist rural communities in keeping them safe. And I'm thinking about for events. There's a 28-day event, which is camping by the Chew Valley Lake, and residents are extremely concerned about the health implications of that. Clearly, there'll be a lot of people who will be coming from outside the community. And I just wondered if the council has any plans to assist the rural communities in dealing with those situations, or indeed trying to prevent them.
Thank you, Karen. Dina or Will, are you? Will, you're on mute. Will, you're on mute.
I am on mute. Sorry.
Okay. Can I just make a general comment first of all, and then perhaps Dina will go. So I think it is important to recognise that the council doesn't police the sort of the issues around the pandemic. We haven't got the resources to do that, and we haven't got the powers to do that. Clearly, where there are specific instances that we need to have some regulatory oversight, we will affect and discharge our responsibilities. But I do think understanding and managing expectation is important. We've obviously got a public health responsibility, and Bruce may want to just outline a more about what that is. But I do think it's really important that people understand what we can do and what we aren't set up to do.
Thank you, Will. Bruce, did you want to add to that at all before I bring Dina in?
Just briefly, I know that the emergency planning and events team do have discussions about things that are happening that we consider might have health risk, and talk to police and event organisers where there are concerns. But as Will says, that's what we can do. We don't have powers to say yes or no to everything that goes on. But there are people who engage in those discussions, and if there are concerns, feed through to them, and they will take them into account.
I'll bring Dina in next before I come back to you, Karen. Okay, Dina?
Yes, thank you, Karen. I was just going to say this particular issue was brought to my attention this morning, so I have put out some inquiries already to find out exactly what is going on here, and then I can come back to you with the specific response on this issue. I assume you would like to have that, as well as I guess Vic as well. Karen?
Oh yeah. Sorry, sorry. You said Vic. I thought you were talking to Vic Pritchard.
No, I wasn't. I was talking about him, not to him.
Oh right, yeah. Both Vic and me, because clearly we have a number of issues. We've got residents who are extremely concerned. We have an older demographic as well, within the whole authority. And I understand the expectations, and I've set those expectations. I do understand where the constraints are, so I have set those expectations. That doesn't necessarily mitigate the concern of residents. So and I have been in touch with Sage as well. So I am doing that, and I do understand the constraints, and I have passed those constraints on. But clearly, it's not helping the residents.
Yeah, no, and as I said, with this specific case, I will get some actual facts for you and then come back to you. Okay.
So my understanding, and again, Bruce, correct if I'm wrong, my understanding is that as we're at the moment, the law is still that gatherings of more than 30, if it's a gathering in an event, that's the legal limit. And obviously, if there are events that are taking place that are more than that, then that should be reported to the police. I think that's right, Bruce, isn't it?
I believe that's the current situation. It's a watch this space, because that things change rapidly. But I think that's still where we are. Yeah.
We've got Sergeant John Raisey with us. So, John, rather than I'm trying not to put you on the spot, but are you able to answer that in any way?
Well, what I can say, obviously nationally, we're very aware. We've seen in papers large gathering in beaches, in parks. We've got pubs reopening now, which are far in excess of 30 people. The 30 person is certainly confusing. Where I would say a 30 person limit comes into play is something like when someone's having a barbecue in a garden, that sort of situation we may attend and speak to them. But I have to admit, I don't know anything about the event that you're talking about and whether it's being held on council land or private land or the situation about it. I certainly haven't had an invite to a SAGE event personally. There will be some limit on obviously what the council can do to stop things, and certainly from a police point of view, we wouldn't disperse a meeting as long as people were showing that it had been properly organised and mitigating had been put in. So that's what we would expect.
Okay, thank you, John. I think that sort of sets the scene there. Now, there's something on the chat from Dawn saying that an email went out from the events department stating that it would not be permitting any events that create large gatherings. So I don't know whether that answers your question there, Karen, to some extent, if it's a private event or otherwise. But I think we've sort of.
And if there are events that we have to license, authorise, and clearly that would be the case from the council's perspective. We wouldn't authorise something that was against the law, clearly.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, Karen, does that? I think that picks up all of those points. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Dina, Will, thank you for that. I'd like to move on to items.
Jackson joined the meeting.
Oh, Eleanor's arrived. Is that Eleanor just arrived?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I had a voice come through. Yeah, so next item on the agenda, item 7, update on climate emergency and the renewal vision. We've got a 30-minute slot for this. First off, I'm going to invite Councillor Sarah Warren and Jane Wildblood to introduce the item. And then we've got Peter Kapiner to come in at some point during that discussion. So, Sarah, will you start?
Yep, sure. So thank you for inviting me. So Jane and I came to see this forum about last autumn, I think. And since then we visited all the community forums around North East Somerset. And from a North East Somerset perspective, I know lots of parishes have been declaring climate emergencies over those months. So there's been lots of progress, which is really exciting. In fact, I had an idea to put to you that maybe you can go away and think about, because something we've done across Bath and North East Somerset, or that we've supported, has been the development of a schools climate emergency network where they are sharing good practice from one school to another. And I had a conversation with someone from a parish council recently that made me think that perhaps that's the sort of thing that might be helpful for you in future as parish councils who've declared climate emergencies, so that you can share good practice. So perhaps you can go away and think about whether you want to set up a forum or whether you can use this forum to do that function or something like that. So that's just something for you to go and think about. So in terms of what we at the council have done, we were in the process then, having visited all of your forums around North East Somerset, we were in the process of setting up a big takeover day at the Guildhall that would have been, you know, very participative and involved lots and lots of members of the public, speakers, various different work streams that were much more, you know, trying to hear from people. And of course, coronavirus hit, and so none of that has happened. But what we did do was I was able to pull out from the work stream that would have been people from the community who would have come to do short presentations of things they've done. We turned some of those into webinars. So that was, that's been really, I've really enjoyed that myself. So I've interviewed some of them since April, 6 of those. There's lots more we could do. At the moment we're doing, we're working with Dina on the ones that are around what the council is doing, but we may come back to some more of those community groups, because I found that really refreshing and positive. This was the sort of people I've been meeting with are people who've they've seen a window of something that needed doing, such as sharing and repairing to tackle the culture by which things that you buy, like vacuum cleaners, break down quickly. So, you know, is there scope, instead of each buying you know, a big drill? Can you share it? So there's a share and repair group. So I had a lovely conversation with Lorna, who set that up, and learnt how, you know, how it came about that she decided to do that, and I found that really inspiring. So it was lots of people. They're available on YouTube, by the way. I think probably on the council, and I now personally have a YouTube channel as well. So if you missed them and would like to go and see them, there are others about more trees for Bath and North East Somerset, and there was a farmer, Donald McIntyre, who farms wildflower seeds and knows a lot about meadows. And there was John Adler, who I'm sure you know because he's a member of this forum, talked about what Freshford has been doing. So I really enjoyed that. And so now really where we are is we need to get the dialogue going and pull the learning points for the climate emergency from our experiences through this time of coronavirus, and work out really how we want to take the community forward. So I'll hand over to Jane at that point with her ideas on how we're going to make that happen.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, and hello everyone. It's nice to be back again. Yes, so as Sarah says, we had a difficult time during the first phase of COVID, because we had to put a stop to some of the things that we had been planning. But as she says, the community conversations that she conducted have been extremely useful. And I should say, I think that in terms of the climate emergency programme of work, following on from the October council meeting, we are getting that back on track, although some bits have been delayed. And you'll start to see more things coming out very soon, and including an update to the parish council toolkit on climate emergency. So I think the important thing for me to update you on, as the kind of topic title here, is to talk about the renewal vision. So during the COVID crisis, there have obviously been some, you know, extremely negative impacts. Some of those are to do with our local economy and how vulnerable it has been in terms of tourism and retail and so on, as well as some of the positives that are around some of the changes in behaviour that we've seen around travel, for example, with the increase in cycling and walking that some people have been able to do. There's the kind of behaviour that we want to see more of. So basically what we've set up is a programme of recovery and renewal, within which there's a piece of work that I'm leading on called the Renewal Vision, which which is to respond to some of those things that have happened that we've become more aware of and has really thrown a spotlight on during the COVID crisis. But also taking into account the potential for those actions on the climate emergency that we've already committed to take as an authority, to be helping us in that, basically putting green recovery at the heart of our renewal programme. So some of the things that we're already planning to do on the climate emergency programme are actually part of what we need to do for our renewal vision programme. And the purpose of the piece of work that I'm leading on is to achieve within the next few months a new vision for Bath and North East Somerset that takes all of those things into account, and that takes into account the action we need to take to deliver our 2030 carbon neutrality goal, that everyone can get behind because they've been involved in the development of that vision. So that's the task ahead of us. So some of the activities that we were planning in terms of engaging with the community and all sectors will now be part of this renewal vision process. To inform that work, we're commissioning some work, which is, again, some of the work is things that we were planning to commission anyway, but we're asking some very specific questions now in terms of what does that mean? How does the work that we need to do, for example, you may have seen in the media some stuff around how making homes energy efficient could be a good way of renewing the economy, because it creates jobs in the short term and creates opportunities for people to switch from, say, big construction projects where there may not be any work at the moment to retrofitting people's homes instead. And indeed, the government has set up a home energy homes grant, green homes grant, which they hope to launch in September. But the question, and there have been lots of reports that have been published saying that there are hundreds of thousands of jobs if we follow a green recovery in terms of things like home energy efficiency, but also in terms of developing our renewable energy infrastructure as a nation, and other things around shortening local supply, food supply chains and localizing more production across our economy. So the question that we're asking in some of the research that we're doing now is, given how much we know we've got to do in Bath and North East Somerset, you know, like retrofitting 65,000 homes, for example, by 2030, and developing another 300 megawatts of renewable energy, is we know what the big numbers are nationally, but now we need to know is, if we were in delivering those changes that we need to make anyway in our community, how can we make sure that we get the maximum economic and social benefit to ensure that we develop a much more resilient, diverse and greener economy. So those are the kind of strands of work that we're getting going on now, to inform what will be a big conversation with the community about what that future needs to look like for all of us in Bath and North East Somerset to create that stronger, more diverse, greener economy. So the work we'll do will be multi-layered. We've brought in some external consultants to work with us who've done this kind of work in other places very successfully, to help us to have the right conversations with all the different key players in our community, but also all the different stakeholders. So we've done some work in our community engagement work in the past, looking at how do you reach all parts of our community, particularly those that are harder to reach, for example, young people. And we'll be using all of the work that's been done looking at that to inform the programme of work that we do now. So you will see more webinars, as Sarah was saying, on lots and lots of different subjects related to the renewal programme. So some of them will be about the climate emergency, some of them will not necessarily be directly related to that, but will relate to something to do with how do we build our resilience as a community in the future, so that we can deal with crises as they come further down the line, either related to COVID or to changes in our climate, which we know are coming and would have similar impacts to that. So so we're going to be coming out again. We'll be coming out to all of the community forums to engage with you and the parish, all the parishes, on what does that green recovery and creating a more resilient and diverse economy and achieving our 2030 carbon neutrality goal. What does it mean for you at parish level, in your village, on your high street? And we'll be arranging initially through these electronic means, webinars, conversations. We've got another electronic platform called DLib that we'll be using, that will be about asking specific questions that people in the community can get involved in, and having dialogue with each other, and so that we can gather ideas to make sure that the vision that we produce will be something that everybody can get behind and act upon, because everyone's been involved in helping to develop it. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Jane. I'll ask for questions a little bit later on, but we've got Peter Kappener first. So Peter, if you introduce yourself as well, please. Others may not know who you are.
Indeed, thank you very much. My name's Peter Kappener, working at Bath and West Community Energy. I've got a few slides, if I may share my screen. Just do that.
And that's fine, Peter. Just remember, there are some people who are on the phone who aren't, who have telephoned into the meeting. So
okay,
need to be a bit descriptive if that's the right terminology.
Sure, I will. And just following on from Jane, I mean, the question that we're asking as Bath and West Community Energy is, how can we retain more of the money that we spend on energy within Baines in the local area? And we think, from our point of view, there are some very practical things that we can offer as support for town and parish councils in the area to take action on the climate emergency that can work towards that aim as well. Before I go into the practical things we can do, I just wanted to tell a little bit about Bath and West Community Energy. Many of you probably haven't come across us. We're a community enterprise, and like many community organisations, we started off in a pub. The pub in question was the Wickham, Iram in Wickham. Discussions within community groups, thinking about how can we develop renewable energy within Bath and North East Somerset in a way that benefits local communities. We set ourselves up in 2010, delivering clean local energy, community owned for the common good. And we set ourselves up with a very specific remit, if you like, as a community benefit society. From the beginning, we wanted to establish an organisation that was democratic, one member, one vote, was asset locked, which means that we can't be asset stripped for commercial gain, and fundamentally we're not for profit. We pay interest on investment that members might make, but it's not profit distribution. All profits go back into local communities. The area that we work in is Baines plus some of West Wiltshire and some of South Gloucestershire, some of the parishes in around the area. We started with a view of thinking, how can we retain some local identity but create a level of scale that would enable us to build a community business that could start to employ people. We feel that voluntary help is crucial to this, but we need to also build an employee base that can provide continuity and a strong skill and experience base as well. So this was the area that we looked at. We felt that it was big enough to do that and yet still small enough to create some sense of local identity. And since 2010, we've raised significant sums of money through community fundraising and from senior debt. We've installed enough solar electricity to power roughly around about 4,000 homes, 11 community school systems, 4 on community buildings, including Manvers Street, Lewis House and Manvers Street council offices, 5 ground mounted schemes, and 1 small hydro. Those projects have been operating now for a while successfully. We've donated over 200,000 to our community fund that's been allocated through grants into local communities from a wide range of things, from repair cafes, schools projects, transport projects, community orchards, a whole range of different initiatives, all of which underpinned by our growing supporters network. We've got a range of volunteers around Baines that are actively engaging with the work that we're doing and helping us develop local projects. We've also benefited from a strong partnership and cooperation agreement with Baines Council, who've helped and supported the development of the organisation over the years. Through that time, we've now got to a point where we've got scale, where we've got a strong team. Alex Lockton, who's on the call, who'll be the person who'll be doing most of the work with Parish and Town Councils, in particular, has got a strong experience with installation of renewable energy, used to run the solar division of TH White, ran a renewable energy company himself. I'm proud of the team that we've been able to develop as a result of being able to work at the scale that we are. And fundamentally, this approach to community energy is a different way of doing business. It questions the traditional energy model with 3 particular issues: who owns, who controls, and who benefits from the projects. Who owns? Clearly, from our point of view, the centre of this is the community enterprise. There are a number in the area, both within Baines and the surrounding area. By the community enterprise being at the centre, we can ensure the protections for the assets and the community benefit that those assets generate. Who controls is clearly the members. Our members are our investors, but they're also make up half of our board. They're elected to our board, but also fundamental to the operation of the organisation, providing local accountability to everything that we do. And who benefits to the community, not just through the community fund, but through retaining more and more income at a local level, providing, helping towards the renewal that Jane was talking about earlier. So how can we help? Fundamentally, we want to support people who are interested in developing renewable energy projects that are for and on behalf of local communities. We're already working with a range of parish councils. Locally, we're looking at identifying energy projects that could be renewable energy projects. We're also interested in EV charging networks, electric vehicle charging networks, energy efficiency. There are a range of potential opportunities. We're keen to build local awareness. There's a lot that needs to be done about engaging local people so that they feel connected to these issues and committed to trying to do something about them. There are opportunities for getting match funding into the work that we do. There are funds set up to support the development of projects that we can access to support activities in local areas, fundamentally so that we can develop, then own and operate renewable energy projects on behalf of the community. We want to support local people to invest in those projects and maximise community benefit. In particular, we prioritise grants through the local community fund to community groups that are close to the projects that we operate. So what next? I mean, we've already hearing from parish councils who've declared climate emergencies and thinking, well, what can we do? And perhaps some parish councils nervous about declaring climate emergency because they're not sure what to do. There are some very practical things that we can support with. We're committed to that support. As a community enterprise, we do need to manage our resources. We will only be able to work with a subset of all the parish councils in Baines at any one time. So we're going to be setting up a expression of interest process, asking parish councils to submit what they want to do so we can match our ability to offer support to the local needs that people have. But over a couple of years, we want to develop a programme of work that will meet all those interested councils' needs. We can provide a balance of free and funded support. There's a lot that we can do, particularly once there are actual projects identified. We can take on the development of those projects at no cost from a local point of view. And as I say, we can draw in grants. Where there's very exploratory work to be done, then we may need some funding, but even if that funding isn't available, we can provide some support free. The more funding that we can generate, and some parish councils are looking at trying to draw in some funding for the very exploratory work, it will mean that we'll be able to do more and work with more councils. But we're committed to working with councils, particularly prioritising those areas where there's real potential for new projects. So if you're interested, do get in touch with Nick Bird in particular. Have more details there, his email address, contact number, my details there as well. Just to summarise then, we believe that community energy offers a strong approach that can underpin change. We think this community model really helps, and our experience that it helps build trust, and as a result of that, actual active community consent and participation. There's a growing network looking to promote community energy solutions around Baines, and it's a real opportunity to work across Baines and share ideas and support each other to actually make real inroads into the challenge that we face. We are one of the leading community energy groups in the UK. We've been going perhaps one of the longest, but we've got a proven track record, we've got existing work, we've got a body of experience and expertise. Please do use that. I hope that that expertise and experience and strong community model can support you with your local action. And the final thing I'd say is that for those that are interested, there is a Climate Action Planning Day on the 30th of July run by CSE on behalf of the Avon Local Councils Association. And that could be, if you're interested in thinking, well, what can we do? That would be a really good place to start. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Pete. I'm opening the floor to questions now. Thanks again to Sarah and Jane and Peter. So any questions? I've none on the screen, but there are people on the phone. So I don't know whether anyone has any questions. I'll pause again, wait for somebody to either type or unlock. Go on, Rob. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, interesting presentation, Peter. Thank you very much. what's the criteria that you use to indicate progress and growth of what you're actually delivering and doing?
Do you mean for us as an organisation or for the area that we're working in?
Well, I think it will be you as an organisation, which obviously, hopefully, will impact on the area anyway. Yes. Go on.
Yeah. So initially, creating a financially sustainable business. That was our first goal. Because we didn't want to rely just on grants, we needed to create a community business that could stand on its own 2 feet. We've done that. So from that point, it's then monitoring the growth of the organisation in terms of the number of projects that we're doing and the range of projects that we were doing. So to start off with, for the first 5-6 years, we've been focusing very much on renewable energy projects. We've got the model now that works for that. We're trying to move into other areas like energy efficiency, demand reduction, and looking at storage as well. So there are a number of challenges in energy that we need to take a community approach to. So I think we'll be monitoring our ability to extend into those other areas. And then I guess finally, from a financial and capacity point of view, the range of experience and expertise that we've built that we can offer to potential partners, I think we internally look as a good measure of success as well. And as I say, I'm proud that we've been able to build from nothing, from a voluntary organisation into an organisation that's now got a very strong body of experience. So I think those 3 areas, the work that we do, our financial sustainability and our experience and skills that we can offer are the main areas that we measure ourselves against.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. So the plea really is for parishes to get involved as best they can with yourselves and to see how they can progress their own goals.
Yes, so if you're interested, we get in touch. We'll send you a briefing sheet, more detail about what we can offer and this expression of interest. And please do get in touch.
Okay, thank you very much. So I've got no other speakers or questions. There's nothing on the chat. Marie, I think there's nothing I can see. I don't know whether you've been informed otherwise. Sarah or Jane, did you want to wrap up in any way?
I just want to say thanks to Pete for a really useful, informative presentation, and to Jane as well for explaining what we're going to be doing, and encourage everyone to get involved. And if you're feeling puzzled and you don't know where to start, but you're thinking about declaring a climate emergency, just drop me an email and I'll point you in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, as Sarah said, yeah, any questions, or even if there's no such thing as a silly question on this matter. So anything that come to mind, just send to Sarah, and I'm sure she'll deal with it and point you in the right direction. So thank you very much for that. Great. Okay, so I'd like to move on to the next item on the agenda, please. So that's item 8, the reopening of the high streets. Now, I've got Councillor Neil Butters to kick this off. I know Chris Major's with us, so I'm sure that Chris will want to add some view. And we've got Sergeant John Rayes, who spoke earlier, to give us the policing view. So over to you, Neil.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of introductory comments, if I may. Firstly, apologies from my co-cabinet member for Transport Services, Jo Wright, who's having a very well-deserved break at the moment. She is more leading in this particular area, but I have been doing some boning up and had a lot of help from Linda Dean and Liz Parr in producing a presentation for you, which I hope will answer some of the questions you might have. So let's see if we have a go. Oh, the bulk of it will be on an update on how the pedestrianisation of high streets during the pandemic have worked or not worked. But then later on, there'll be another section on how can we manage the influx of visitors to our rural communities for walks and wild swimming, particularly the impact of increasing parking and safety. And finally, a question has come in about will government's lockdown direction to not use public transport be permanent locally? So those are the three things that I'm going to be addressing, and feel free to answer questions at the
I think
end.
Neil's frozen there.
Okay. Am I?
Is it Neil frozen or is it? No, okay.
Am I? Can you see me? Can you hear me?
I think Neil's fine. It may be Andy.
I think it's Andy. I can hear and see it, Neil fine.
Yeah, I'm okay. Thank you. Sorry, carry on.
Okay. Mark is going to kindly do the slides. So slide 1 and slide 2 is, please, Mark. Okay, so here we go. So slide 3. The initial focus was on Bath City Centre, as this had the largest footfall and the most challenging, with introducing new access restrictions as follows. So 4, next one. Thanks. The council's highways team had to work quickly and without the full consultation period afforded to us under normal circumstances to enable social distancing measures to be put in place in time for the reopening of non-essential businesses on 15th of June. Next one. So York Street, Cheap and Westgate Streets, Upper Borough Walls, 10 a.m. to 6. Milsom Street, Busgate, 10 a.m. to 6. Town and parish councils. Following feedback from the town and parish councils of Radstock, Midsummer Norton, Peacedown, St John, and having learned the lessons from phase 1 in Bath and footfall levels being lower, the decision was taken not to progress the social distancing measures in these areas. 7. However, Keynsham Town Council voted to trial a full closure of Keynsham High Street with effect from Monday, 13th of July, between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. Next one. Generally, the access restrictions have been working well since their implementation, despite a few teething problems, which is understandable given the timescales and limited preparation time. Next one. Essentially, they have achieved the objective of providing greater space for social distancing as a response to the pandemic. In discussion with members of the public, they have suggested that having a car-free environment is generally a nicer experience. I think so. Next one. We've had one test of the application for access system we have now to bring an outside broadcast van into York Street for filming by ITV's Country this week, which is an interview with Paul Crossley, Councillor. Next one. Having identified some constraints, social distancing, dropped curbs and parking, and discussion with various teams, the application has been signed off and granted. Next one. As suggested, there have been a few issues that we are currently continuing to work through, some of which have been resolved. These are as follows. Next. Post office / parcel force collection and delivery. The temporary TRO includes an exemption for post office vehicles, but initially we were unaware, the officers were unaware that parcel force was part of the same group. 14. Following discussion with parcel force, we are now aware that they work under the Universal Service Agreement, so-called, which allows us to provide access where other collection and delivery services don't. There remains some work to understand this in greater detail to ensure we're not challenged. So 14. Utility service providers. To date, we have suggested that access is permitted for emergency utility incidents only, e.g. gas leaks, and that repairs and planned works would be carried out under our application for access system. Some utilities have turned up unannounced and have been turned away by the marshals. In discussion with a BT OpenReach engineer requiring access to Westgate Street, the work was classed as urgent as there was a fault with residential business broadband. Whilst in partial lockdown and request to work from home, we would suggest this is essential. In fact, under street works regulations, customer connection issues have to be treated similarly to emergency works, such as a burst water main. Additionally, they work on a service performance contract, which could invoke a fine that could be passed on to the council. We also had a reinstatement required in Cheap Street following an electrical cable fault. This is classed as immediate urgent under the street works permit system, which the council cannot refuse. Similarly, would be unable to refuse access. In 16, further work and consultation with utility companies is required as part of this ongoing work and in advance of the more robust security project being put in place. 17, removal of the barriers. There have been some instances where drivers have taken it upon themselves to either remove barriers personally to gain access or drive up onto the footway and around. 18, hopefully the protection measures we are currently considering and put in place over the next few weeks will prevent such incidents. 19, access on lower borough walls. For continuity, it was decided that street traders in the south of the city should also adhere to restriction and access before 10 AM and after 6 PM. This was largely accepted, but some drivers realised that the rising bollard is controlled mainly by automatic number plate recognition, allowing them continued access after 10 AM. Next one. We have now removed the vehicle whitelist that was and instructed CCTV staff to consider access requests via the intercom only. 21. I've not heard of further problems, but we have observed vehicles entering Bow Street, travelling the wrong way down the street to gain access to shops. 22. Bid rangers have helped to highlight to businesses of the access restrictions, and we have asked the police to monitor during routine city centre patrols. We will continue to monitor the situation and consider further interventions where necessary. 23. The police are aware of some issues regarding driving in pedestrian areas or not adhering to traffic signs, and these locations will be added to their patrol plans if police then identify any specific issues, and we will educate and enforce where necessary. Next one. The access restrictions has affected where drivers or vehicles go driven by or carrying disabled persons, where they can park. Although it has taken a small number of disabled parking bays out of use, blue badge holders can also park on single or double yellow lines for up to 3 hours. 25. We understand that there are usually disabled parking bays available at most times in the larger city centre car parks, but we are looking to provide some temporary disabled bays in roads outside of those that are restricted, although there are limited spaces for doing this. Next one. On the council's Liverpool neighbourhoods website, where we have been encouraging people to record their views on what sort of improvements are needed across Baines to help with walking and cycling, there are many comments in support of restricting access in Cheap Street, Westgate Street and Milsom Street. In a similar way to the current temporary restrictions, we will undertake a review of the feedback we've received in due course. Further work is required to streamline procedures and protocols, and we continue to maintain lines of communications with various teams across the council to ensure that the project meets its objectives. 27. We will undertake a review of the feedback we received in due course. Right, moving on, managing the influx of visitors to rural communities. 29. The pandemic situation and related lockdown measures have led to an increase in the number of visitors to these locations, and there have been problems with vehicles parked in a manner that causes safety problems or obstructions. 30. In some locations, the council has put in place temporary parking restrictions and temporary traffic regulation orders to enable enforcement. This can require very large amounts of the yellow no waiting cones, which have at times gone beyond the stock available to the council and its contractors. They cannot be left out indefinitely over the summer because they tend to get taken a week around. which means when there is a period of good weather, they need to be redeployed and then taken back in again to ensure effective enforcement. 31, nearly there. Such temporary restrictions are suitable for short periods, but do not work so well for the current situation where they can place significant pressure on resource levels, impacting the council's ability to enforce these and existing restrictions effectively, particularly as these issues tend to occur at the same time when weather conditions are favourable. 32. While yellow line road markings are an alternative, they are not particularly suitable for a temporary measure because they give the impression of being permanent. They'll have gone in without consultation, and there isn't any good way of removing them without leaving a scar on the road or causing some damage to the surface. 33. So each location where problems occur requires its own solution, and the council has worked with the police to find the best way of dealing with them. Just so that you know, I have one of these prime beauty spots in my area at Worley Wear, and I've walked all around the site with the parish council, so I'm pretty familiar with the problems there. Right, and then lastly, this question, will government's lockdown direction to not use public transport be permanent locally? I've approached Andy Strong on this, who is our main lead into WECA, and he says, I can say categorically that when the government advice shifts to being more positive about travelling on public transport, WECA will reflect that. It is committed to targets for public transport use in JLTP4 and the bus strategy. So there we are. Now, I understand from a meeting with First Bus this morning that the government message about using public transport may be changing as soon as tomorrow. It not necessarily being actually positive, but at least neutral and not requiring all of us to be advising people not to travel by public transport. So at least we've got something for change there, and it's opening the way to a more positive message for the future. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil. So before I bring the speakers in, I've got a list of speakers here. I've got Chris Major and John Raisey. So Chris, did you want to add anything to that at all, please?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing really to add. It's a very full roundup. I'll just note that we have been meeting on site with the accessibility groups, including representatives from the RNIB, to look at how the road closures impact on those with disabilities of different types, just so that we can make any adjustments necessary to make the impacts lessened.
Thank you very much, Chris. No doubt there'll be some questions in a moment. So Sergeant John Raisey, would you like to add anything?
Well, just to say, with the vehicles contravening the road closures, certainly what I've seen on patrol is vehicles reversing the wrong way up Milsom Street and also on Bow Street, just for deliveries, trying to get as close as they can to premises. Clearly not acceptable. The obvious thing is members of the public are expecting the road to be closed. They're certainly not expecting roads which are normally one way to suddenly be confronted with vehicles reversing that are not going to have very good visibility whilst they're reversing compared to going forwards. It's just a recipe for disaster. Obviously, we've been contacted by Baines Council to advise how frequently this is happening. As mentioned in the councillor's slides, we are working to patrol those areas to deal where we can. What I would also encourage is, if members of the public or council employees get any photographs of vehicle registrations, please pass them to us. We will at least write a letter to those drivers to see if we can find out who was driving on that day. Obviously, a lot of them are company employees. Give words of advice. Obviously, where we see the people, we will choose to either enforce or again give words of advice. And again, with the second point about the wilds swimming and other locations, obviously with the very good weather that we had at the start of lockdown, it was completely the wrong timing, as the British weather tends to do. Exceedingly heavy footfall in a lot of places, which tend to be a trap to the good weather anyway. But with pubs closed, other locations not available, we've been absolutely inundated. And I could list off a vast list of locations which have been very challenging for us. A lot of resource has gone in there, say some great work with the temporary regulations and prevention of the parking, but with it comes a lot of issues as well of, if you close off one area, where will people park instead? If they're hell-bent on going to that location, they will probably find somewhere even less suitable to park as well. So it has been a challenging time. Thankfully, we've had a lot of grey clouds recently, but good weather could hit us again at any time.
Thank you for that update, John. And on the behalf of all of us, I think I'd like to give our thanks to the police, because it has been challenging. Areas like in the centre of Bath and Salford, Whalley Weir, I know have been very challenging for you. So thanks for the great work, and pass that on to your team as well, please. Right, so I've got a list of speakers here. So I've got Karen Warrington first, then Rob Appleyard. So Karen, please.
Yeah, I just wondered, we've talked about temporary TROs, but I just wondered if it's possible, and I understand that TROs are a legal process, but are there any plans potentially for the council to put some priorities on some permanent TROs where appropriate, and we can expedite those? I'm thinking round the Chew Valley, because we've got narrow roads. People are parking really irresponsible, or have been parking really irresponsibly. Just wondered if you did have any plans to look at those and where appropriate make some of those permanent.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, I think that's directed to Chris Major. Is that one?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we always have a forward plan of TROs we're going to develop, Karen, and assuming those locations are already recorded with the team, we will look and decide which schemes to take forward as resources allow. And there are a number of different priorities, as you can imagine, during these times, and we do have limited capacity to take forward TROs. So if you need to let us know of the specific locations, I can come back to you with timings for that work.
Yeah,
Karen, you want to come back?
Yeah. I think it's very clear that there are some areas, and I think very, very clear that there are some areas that are a real problem at the moment, especially with lockdown, and with only just easing. And I just wonder whether some of those could be prioritised. And I understand it's very difficult to shift people around, because we've had it happen to us in a number of parishes, but it is a massive problem, and it impacts in some of the communities where the roads are narrower as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. So
make a quick comment, if I may.
Yeah.
About that. I think to some degree one's got to be careful what one wishes for, because Claverton Parish Council with Whalley Weir has now come into my patch since the last election. I'm learning more about the issue of Whalley Weir there, and a lot of people will say, well, you must try to ban parking on the verges on the A36, and you think, well, quite rightly, but unfortunately the implications are that people will then start parking in front of villagers' homes where there are no restrictions. And so, on balance, in that particular case, they've decided they won't fight that particular battle. It is very difficult. I mean, the roads in the Chew Valley area, I know, are very, very difficult to come to good solutions to. So, if Karen can come up with some priorities there, that would be really helpful.
The TRO, I understand there's consultation anyway, so hopefully, the parish councils will be involved in that, and they will understand the implications with villagers, because we get haphazard parking outside our houses and our driveways anyway. So I think people will understand the implications of that, and that's why I think the consultation will be key.
Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. I'll just read out my list. I've got Rob Appleyard next, then somebody called Jack, and then Hal McPhee. So Rob first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it was quite interesting to hear about the methodology, obviously, of the distancing measures that went in around certainly our areas of heavy footfall. And I just really want to just concentrate on that particular piece at the moment. I mean, if we go back to March, suddenly we were all told to lock down, and we entered a different world. And a lot of our essential retailers found ways of carrying on business, either keeping the shop open or doing deliveries and things like that. And they were supported by a limited number of our residents who would actually visit them and obviously go home because everybody was staying in. And they were observing the 2-metre rule. It became pretty obvious there were going to be 2 further tranches of people that were going to start coming back into the community. Those people that were coming out of the easing up of lockdown, and the third lot were those people who had been shielding. Now, when it was realised that the people were going to start coming to the shops, it wasn't enough for the shops to have the 2-metre rule observed along the pavement outside, because people passing them would have to go into the road, either in between parked cars or even in the traffic, to maintain a 2-metre rule. And if it didn't happen, they were making themselves vulnerable and everything like that. So we followed the government guidelines to actually create distancing measures in and around those heavy footfall areas. My particular area is Larkhall, and those people that follow social media will see that it was a bit of a hotbed, because one of the advantages that we've got of having low numbers in this area in terms of the pandemic is that unfortunately people get quite complacent about it, and they don't appreciate that the virus is still there, it's still deadly. We're just managing to isolate it through our behaviours. And so there was quite a lot of hostile resistance to those measures. But the reason that we were very focused on actually bringing that into place is because that other cohort that I mentioned, there were those people that were shielding, and they are beginning to be released to be able to come into the community. I mean, I know this because my wife shielded for been nearly 14 weeks, so I know exactly the mental and the challenges of just making those journeys back into the shops are. So we had to create safe environments to allow those people to engage within their local communities, feeling quite safe that they can do so in a relatively protected way. And that's why if you are in areas where you've got heavy footfall around, maybe some of your retail areas, and bollards are being suggested, please look at it for the reasons it's gonna happen, not because those bollards are horrible. I mean, red and white, they do nothing to the air and anything like that, but that's not their function. Their function is to protect people. So if it is going to happen in your area and everything like that, I would ask you if you can actually embrace it and understand the reason we're doing it, which is really public safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. I'll move on, and then maybe some responses to that a bit later. So I've got Hal next. Eleanor next. Eleanor Jackson, and then Hal McPhee. Eleanor, how is Eleanor getting on? Hold on.
I need to be unmuted.
All right, we can hear you now, Eleanor.
Hello. First of all, my apologies for being late. I mean, that's a record. 45 minutes to get into a meeting. I am sorry.
You've got Eleanor, sorry, just a minute, Eleanor. You've got 2 microphones switched on somehow, so you need to switch one of them off. I don't know how. Try
okay,
again.
I'll use the phone then, if you could.
That's better. Yeah.
Okay.
Please. Yeah, that's much better.
Right. I think from the discussion so far, one important point has emerged, which Neil hinted at, and thanks for the presentation and everything, is that what is a solution for one area of Baines may be catastrophic somewhere else. That what works in Larkhall most certainly is not appropriate for the centre of small villages, which quite often don't have pavements at all. I'd like to thank officers and those who were involved in the decision for listening to common sense and not enforcing a removal of car parking in the middle of Redstock. Because if anybody knows Redstock, they know that a lot of people live on the hilltops and they can't just walk down, and they can't cycle back up to Rislington or wherever with their cat food. You have to use a car or public transport, and of course that's another kettle of fish altogether. So thank you very much for listening to common sense. My question is, can you do a bit more? Well, I've got two for the price of one. Can we do a bit more to get the pavements unblocked? I've been emailing non-stop for several weeks to try and get some of the hedges cut, which are blocking the pavements, both in the centre of Redstock, in Westfield, all over the place. I'm sure everybody knows a hedge that's coming halfway out across the pavement. And the second one is, why can't we adopt the Otley solution? That is, you mark the pavements out like the shops are marked out, so people go in one direction up one side of the road and the other direction coming back down the other side. And, you know, if it works in Yorkshire, I'm quite sure it could work in rural areas where the pavements are narrow, the roads are narrow, and if the traders are going to survive, they've got to be able to unload near their businesses. Because one point that doesn't seem to have registered anywhere, I know Brexit is very near, but at the moment the EU delivery regulations still hold force, and there are severe restrictions on how far away from your shop you can park to deliver fresh food to the shop. So please get the hedges cut. I suggest marking up the pavements. And thirdly, of course, we've got all these wild cyclists crashing around the place. Great danger for those of us who are mainly on foot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. I don't know whether, Chris, there was any response you needed to make there?
Chair,
I will check up on the hedges. We have a process in place where we write to the property owner and ask them to cut back their hedge. If they don't do it, then we will undertake the work and recharge back to the property owner. So I'll make sure that is going through the process as expected. We have had a number of questions regarding one-way systems on pavements. The feedback nationally seems to be that the public don't abide by them in many locations, and it can cause more problems than they're worth. But we will continue that dialogue to see if whether or not specific schemes for specific locations may work going forward as we continue to go through the pandemic process.
Thank you. Yeah, and Neil. Yes, and just before you come in, Neil, that hedges issue I think will be really beneficial to a lot of people. Neil.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Sean McGall, one of our colleagues, 3 or 4 weeks ago now, he raised with me the question of the importance of cutting back hedges. He'd been approached by somebody representing visually impaired interests, and I can well see the problem. You know, sometimes I go out for a walk late at night when it's dark and so forth, and it's no fun to crash into a tree branch you can't see, and we have to remember that, you know, that's what life's like 24 hours a day for a lot of people. So we actually put out a press release a couple of weeks ago explaining exactly the sensible system that Chris Major has been outlining, whereby we give people a period of notice to cut back their hedge. Otherwise, we say we will do it and then send them the bill. Unfortunately, a local paper sub-editor couldn't resist a headline saying that people would be fined, which of course set various hairs in motion. I think it may be the first time I managed to get quoted in the Daily Mail. And then the phone rang, and there was a sub-editor from the Metro, would you believe, who wants to know what the maximum fine was. And then a visually impaired councillor from Carlisle phoned me up, who told me it had made several inches in the local Carlisle paper and sent me a cutting. So I presume it's gone fairly viral in some quarters, but it is very important. And what we have to be very careful as a council, of course, is not just criticising other people, but making sure our own house is in order. So any examples that people know about of council hedges getting unruly, please let me know. Hopefully I won't be inundated, but I haven't been so far, and we'll see what we can do to get them put right, because it must be the same level for all. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. So that's council hedges, not councillor hedges getting unruly, isn't it? Before I bring Sergeant Raisey, and I've got Hal McPhee, the next speaker on my list. So Hal, and then I'll bring Sergeant Raisey in.
I was just going to make a few observations about the road closure in Keynsham High Street and our experience there. First of all, it's a 9 until 5 closure. It is a very easy one. We put to set it up, we put a single road closed sign up. And so we do that at 9 o'clock and we take it away at 5. It's not monitored during the day, although the shopkeepers nearby are keeping us informed. We've had emergency vehicles in today. As regards the disabled, there have been a few points, but we have allowed the dial-a-ride in. And so there is a possibility for people of limited movement to get in. One thing I wanted to mention is that we are trying to make it as good an experience as possible to encourage people to come down, because we want the shopkeepers to do well, and it is obviously much nicer for the pedestrians there. What I have done, and Manda Rigby was helpful with this, is that the government has made the licensing of tables and chairs outside much faster and easier. So I copied out that and took it into the cafes and places that were selling food, and they were all very positive about it. The negatives have mainly been the one that Eleanor just mentioned, of people complaining about cyclists. And in fact, we didn't want cyclists originally because cycles go at a much faster speed than pedestrians. And so it may be, if we have some kind of accident or event, that we will go back to Baines and ask, because it's not much of a diversion for cyclists, but hopefully they will behave themselves. And a final point is to say that the Baines staff were very professional through the whole thing, helped and made it very easy for us to do this. So far, it's a very positive experience.
Thank you very much, Hal. So I'm going to bring Sergeant Raisey in now, draw a line under this item, because a lot of the issues that you raised there, Hal, and others, are to do with sort of the high streets, which is the next item that we might, that there are items that we might want to pick up again at some other point. So because we've got that seminar during the week that Dina mentioned, so there may be an opportunity to come back and put something on the agenda again next time around to get some feedback on that. So Sergeant John Raisey.
Yeah, it was just a very, very quick point on that about the one-way systems, that places like Wells, not everyone might be abiding by one-way pavement plans, but that doesn't mean the majority of people don't follow it, and you shouldn't throw something out just because there's some people that aren't going to engage. Most people will, and it's worth thinking about.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, John. That it's about what the majority will do and take on board. It's like face coverings and all these things. The majority will do it, and if there are some people that just choose not to, well, that's how it is. That's how life is, I think, generally. Okay, I'd like to move on. I've got no other speakers. I don't think there's anything that we need to add, unless there was some interesting views raised in the chat just in case you want to read it about birds nesting and things like that. So I think it's worth having a read of that and taking some of that away. But I'd like to move on to the next item on the agenda, please. Okay. Okay, so resilient communities. Councillor Rob Appleyard, I believe that you'll introduce this item.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, hello. I nearly fell off the screen then. Well, there's two parts of it. I think one part of it is also about the health side of it as well. I just really wanted to touch on, and I know we've got a couple of officers here who have got a lot of the detail about what's happening in terms of the community coming together through the pandemic. Now, first of all, what I would like to say is just a huge respect and a huge thank you for all the groups out there in the parishes and the villages who have banded together and created workforces which actually help those in their areas that are vulnerable. And that's been hugely helpful to the Compassionate Community Hub that was set up. Now, that was set up in literally weeks, and in council world, that is actually almost unheard of. I mean, it was a phenomenal effort, and that happened because everybody forgot about the boundaries and focused on what we needed to achieve. And that has been the strength of the Compassionate Communities Hub. And, you know, I know there's loads of data coming out at the moment about it. I mean, to date, they've done something like 6,800 telephone calls. There's been over 300 emergency food parcels. The total number of people who've been supported by food has been over 500. We've had a base from the community of about 1,300 volunteers, and nearly 900 of those have been actively out there picking up and delivering medicines, doing food parcels, and doing a very simple task is just picking up the phone and talking to somebody. And for those people that have been shielded, that has been enormously helpful, because one of the biggest challenges they would actually have is all around their mental health, that isolation, that being cut off from their normal networks. So the Compassionate Community Hub has been absolutely phenomenal in pulling that together. There's been partners in there, obviously the council have been in there, but we've had the CCG in there. We've had Virgin Care, who've been really, really instrumental in enabling us to keep the data as we want. And one of the challenges that we have moving forward is actually retaining a lot of that good work of the hub as we move forward and everything like this. Now, I know we've got Dave on the call here, who's really been on the ground there. And I don't know if Claire's gone yet, but she's been actually in the hub all the time and working with Joe Scammell from Virgin Care in leading that support. But what I will say, the one thing that the Compassionate Community Hub have actually been able to do with the communities, where the community has gone, maybe delivered something to the door, they don't necessarily have the need to actually pick up other issues that are actually happening with that particular person or that particular household. And this is where the Compassionate Community Hub has really paid off, because most people have more than one issue that they need maybe to have somebody to understand. And the way the hub is being set up, there's no walls there. The issues can be easily picked up by other people. We have like pods, and that cross-working has been phenomenally effective of doing that. So I'm really glad that when we first started off, there was a little bit of protectionism from maybe some of the community areas, because they were doing some great work, but they quickly realised that the community hub could actually enhance what they were doing and validate their position in there. So it's been a very, very good collaborative process.
Thank you, Rob. So I've got Bruce Lawrence and Dave Dixon to answer any questions here, or whether they wanted to add any points that Rob's raised. I'd just like to add my thanks and, well, the council's thanks to all those who've put their shoulder to this, because as you say, Rob, it's been a huge effort and very commendable all the way around. So, Bruce, did you want to add anything, or Dave Dixon? I know you're not really Sarah. You are Dave Dixon. I can see that.
Let Dave start, because he was more involved in the hub, and I'll answer questions about local outbreak plans or parish involvement, whatever. So I think I'll give the bit to Dave for a start.
Thank you, Dave. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, 4 months ago, when all of this started, which it seems like 4 years, but there were two things that we knew. One, that this was going to be a bit of a marathon. It wasn't going to be a sprint. And the other thing that we knew very quickly was that we would be swamped by the sheer number of calls from people unless we were able to push an awful lot of it down to our partners at a grassroots level. And that was one of the things that we were very keen to try and achieve. There are some marvellous examples out there in the parishes and in Bath in the city of organisations and groups that have done tremendous work over the last 4 months, which, to be honest, without them, we would not have been able to have delivered the service that we have. So we've had 6,800 calls over the last 4 months. We've had thousands and thousands of people shielding in their houses, some of whom have not left the house probably since Christmas. And a lot of little issues and things that you never really think about all of a sudden come to the fore. So if you've got hearing aids and your batteries fail, where do you get your hearing aids from if you're not allowed to leave the house? You know, a lot of the food stuff, a lot of the medication stuff where people would have sorted things out for themselves, all of that went completely out of the window. What we did as part of, we've done with the hub over the last 4 months, and I do urge you to spend some time to watch it if we send you them, is we've had a little film made about the Compassionate Communities Hub, and it's called No Wrong Door. Because basically it means whoever you are, if you come to the attention of any of the organisations on the radar, we need to look and we need to try and solve your issues, even if they are complex. So Rob has mentioned that before. A lot of those issues that are coming through at the moment, they may have started because it was to do with food poverty and they're not able to feed themselves, but actually there may be underlying health issues. There may be underlying safeguarding issues. There may be underlying poverty issues that the CAB can help with. And one of the big issues and one of the real successes of the hub with Virgin Care and with the 3SG and the volunteer partnership is that we've got this centralised client-based system where we can share information securely, sensitive information about people, so we can try and unpick some of those really complex cases and try and actually make a positive impact on supporting them during whatever issues that they particularly got with themselves at the moment. And a lot of that is shown through the emergency food parcels, which we've done about 340 emergency food parcels. They're about 5% of the calls that came into the hub, and we could cope with about a 5% emergency rate. Anything more than that, and we were going to struggle. But what we've managed to do out of those emergency food parcels is only about 25% of them are repeats. So people have come in, again, that no wrong door message. They've come into the system, they are in immediate need for emergency food, but the underlying issues that we could look at and address with them meant that once we've done that one emergency food parcel, we managed then to get them to be able to stand back up on their own 2 feet again and to be much more proactive with those individual members of our community. And again, we couldn't have done that without some of these organisations. And I know, looking at the faces on the screen here, that a lot of you are involved in an awful lot of these organisations, the food banks, the local churches, the 3SG, the Bar City Farm, Mercy in Action, all these charities who've been supporting hundreds and hundreds of our most vulnerable residents over the last 4 months. I mean, what I would say is we went on a hockey stick learning curve
certainly in the first 3 or 4 weeks. But what we have managed to do is we have managed between all of us to gain an enormous amount of knowledge and experience in how to deal with this issue if it should, heaven forbid, raise its head again in the autumn. So we've come an awful long way in a very short space of time. And that knowledge, we need to make sure that that knowledge, which at the moment is in a core group of people, we need to make sure that we can get that knowledge spread to a wider group for the future, because a lot of the information that's there is going to be valuable to us as a council and to you as parish and town councils and to the community and voluntary sector in about how we deal with our complex cases in the future. I think that's probably enough for me, actually.
Thank you very much, Dave. And as I say, I think everyone would echo our thoughts that the amount of work that's been put in has been tremendous and very, very commendable to the whole community. I don't have any particular questions being raised by anyone. Bruce, I don't know whether you just want to sort of wrap this item up then. I'll ask you to just, yeah, go on, Bruce.
So I suppose my only message is that we were planning, as we've been lucky so far in having few cases in the southwest and few in Bath and northeast Somerset. We really are amongst the lowest, but that means we must, we need to try to protect that by not being complacent, by the basic behaviours of maintaining distancing as much as we can within all the rules and all the easing of lockdown, and spreading good behaviour and good hygienic behaviour. And then if anyone gets ill, being very quick to get tested, quick to comply with the tracing arm of the system and self-isolate. And if we can do all those things, we can have our freedoms and we can keep our cases low. We won't keep them down to none, because in winter, we will move inside. We will get cases, but we can keep them low. And if we're not careful, we'll see them rise. And at the very worst, I don't think it'll happen in Baines really, but we could even head towards some reversal and some partial lockdown. So I want, I'm just trying to enlist the support of everyone who has an influence in the community. And I know it's difficult. I know it's difficult to influence everyone's behaviour, but setting a good example. If we do get outbreaks, getting publicity in your local areas is going to be really important. That's a role for all community leaders, helping people who are isolating, which I think you have done already, and you understand just simple basic support to your neighbours and your communities. We're setting up, we have big national systems, and at local level we're trying to help coordinate and supplement for managing outbreaks, whether they're in schools, in care homes or in the community, and we're trying to do our bit, coordinating quite a complex system. But the public bit is really the most important for me. It's that it all depends on how people behave. And I know that that's a challenge to all of us. We're all part of the public, aren't we? But the better we can do that, the better we can spread good messages, challenge people if they're really not doing what they should. It works for all of us in the end, and we have to try to work on that together. I recognise, of course, we have tourists, we have visitors, we need them, they're part of our livelihood, but we also need them to behave and cooperate and be controlled. And we had some discussion earlier about the big events. I think the council will try to suppress big events. That we don't want huge numbers of people gathering and not spacing, and especially when there's alcohol in the picture, people's behaviour does go out the window a bit, doesn't it? So I think that's all I would say by way of any kind of presentation. I didn't really want to, it's getting late, I don't want to take up more of your time. Happy to answer questions, happy to answer them later if you want to write to me. And very much, if we have cases and outbreaks in your areas, I'll be after you to help with the solution as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Bruce, and appreciate that message. I think it's very important that message comes from yourself in your role, and actually we try to get that out to all our community. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. So I've got Rob, and then I think we're going to close this item. So Rob.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, in my sort of ramble just now, I obviously mentioned Dave, Sarah, and the officers working at the hub and everything like that. But without doubt, we've just been living, and we still are, in very quite a complicated, fast-moving arena, and a lot of information's come down from government, everything like that. And without a doubt, Bruce and his team have done a phenomenal job in guiding us the right way and everything like that. It's a hugely respected public health team. We're very fortunate. I just really put on record our thanks to Bruce and his team.
Thank you very much, Robin, and I appreciate your support. It's been fabulous too. Thank you.
Yeah, well done. Thank you, everyone. So I've drawn a line under that item. I've got no other speakers on the item, so I've drawn a line. If there's any comments or emails or any messages like that, then obviously there's Bruce, Rob Appleyard and Dave Dixon in their respective areas. I'm sure they'll receive their emails and try to get information out to the parish communities. That'd be good. Thank you. So I'd want to move on to item 10. Item 10, the dates of the future meetings. The next one is scheduled for Thursday, the 22nd of October. I know that's probably in diaries. Any views or comments on that? I don't know if there's any feedback, anything needed, anything more on that. I think we'll keep that one in the diary. Obviously, there are these seminars going on, and if obviously there are any emergencies within particular parishes about lockdown or whatever, then we'd have to sort of convene as and when ad hoc, if necessary, with a smaller group. But I'm happy to be involved in that if necessary. So any further ado from anyone before I wrap up? I'd like to thank all the main speakers. I'd like to particularly thank John Raisey for joining us, and as I say, pass on our thanks to your policing team, particularly the city centre team, John, because I know I deal a lot with you on the city centre team. I'm being a bit selfish there, taking the agenda. But I like to draw a line at the meeting. So I'm just pausing, make sure I don't cut anyone off. Thank you very much. So end of meeting. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for organisation. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Marie. And bye, everyone. Thank you.
Excellent chairing, Chair.